My phone lit up with a photo of my husband holding two newborn babies that were not mine, and underneath it he wrote a single cruel sentence asking me to be happy for him. I did not cry. I did not scream. I set the phone face down and reached for a much thicker folder, one that would end his entire life far more completely than any judge ever could. My name is Vivian Hale. For 5 years, I was married to Marcus Whitfield, a tech founder from an old-money Southern family who once could not even afford his own rent. I hold a master's degree in financial risk management, and I built the entire financial architecture that turned his failing startup, Vantage Dynamics, into a company worth tens of millions. I rebuilt his books, wrote his pitch decks, and once used my late parents' inheritance to save his payroll during his darkest quarter. I thought we were partners in every sense. The text that shattered everything arrived while I was liquidating every asset I owned jointly with Marcus. It came from him directly, a photo of him and my former best friend Brianna Cole cradling newborn twins in a hospital suite, announcing their new chapter and hoping I could move on too. Brianna had been my college roommate, the woman I introduced to Marcus, the woman I trusted with every secret I had. Seeing her name attached to that photo did something colder than heartbreak inside me. When Marcus called minutes later, his voice dripped with rehearsed sympathy, the tone of a man who wants you to fall apart so his betrayal can feel like destiny instead of cruelty. He told me our marriage had felt like an icebox for 5 years, that Brianna finally gave him the warm home I never could. I answered calmly, asked if I owed the happy couple a gift, and listened to silence stretch across the line while his confidence quietly cracked at the sound of my composure. What Marcus never understood was that I do not process betrayal the way other people do. My training taught me to treat catastrophic loss as a data problem, something to be assessed, contained, and corrected. While he assumed I would beg and cry, I had already spent that entire week building a private financial map on my office wall, tracing every transaction he had run through Vantage Dynamics against hotel records, shell companies, and Brianna's social media, building a case long before he confessed a single word aloud. The next afternoon, Marcus arrived at my penthouse with his corporate attorney, expecting a wreck ready to accept anything. Instead, his belongings were already boxed by the door, and I calmly walked him through a settlement that gave him almost nothing beyond what he had earned before our marriage. His lawyer went pale, realizing the quiet wife everyone dismissed had documented every dollar of personal capital she poured into the company, protected under an ironclad clause in their own prenuptial agreement. Marcus tried weaponizing our fertility struggles against me, claiming I was too cold to ever conceive. I reminded him, without raising my voice, that both of us had been medically cleared by 3 specialists, and asked how Brianna, living a far more chaotic lifestyle than mine, had conceived twins on her very first attempt with him. He had no real answer, only wounded pride, and I watched something flicker behind his eyes, a fear he could not yet name. He left that day believing he had simply discarded a bitter, humiliated wife. What he did not know was that a private investigator I had already hired delivered a file that would unmake his entire new life. The documents showed his own cousin, a broke and reckless man named Preston Whitfield, entering a boutique fertility clinic 7 separate times over the past year, always around the same dates as Brianna's private appointments there. The clinic quietly offered a donor program for wealthy clients wanting total control over their children's origins without public complications. Brianna had never conceived naturally with Marcus at all. She used embryos created with donor material from Preston, gambling on family resemblance to protect her secret forever, since doctors rarely question a genetic match within the same bloodline. It was a calculated plan built on the assumption that no one, especially not me, would ever look closely enough to notice. While Marcus paraded his new family online, captioning photos about legacy and blessings, I quietly restructured my finances into an offshore trust, severing every remaining tie to his world. An old family contact still working inside his hometown courthouse told me Marcus was planning an enormous baby reveal at his parents' historic estate, inviting the entire county to formally present his new heirs to Southern high society. That celebration was not simply a party. It was Marcus building himself a stage, one designed to erase my quiet exit and rewrite himself as the triumphant patriarch finally rewarded with the family he deserved. The bigger the stage a man builds for his own ego, I thought, the more devastating the fall becomes when the floor gives out beneath him in front of everyone watching. I flew into his hometown 2 days before the event and stayed with Aunt Dorothy, a retired courthouse administrator who understood old money hypocrisy better than anyone alive. I asked her to quietly deliver the forensic file to Margaret Whitfield, Marcus's mother, a woman whose devotion to the family bloodline bordered on religious obsession. Once she saw proof her grandchildren carried Preston's blood instead of her son's, her pride would detonate with a force no lawyer could contain. On the morning of the celebration, I watched from a hotel window as 300 guests filled the estate lawn beneath silk banners announcing the twins' arrival. Marcus stood on a raised stage, glowing with pride as he thanked Brianna for finally giving him the family he wanted, while Margaret sat frozen at the family table, hands trembling around her teacup, having clearly already read every page Dorothy delivered that morning. Just as Marcus finished speaking, Margaret rose so violently her chair screeched across the patio, silencing the crowd. She marched onto the stage, snatched the infant boy from her son's arms, and studied his face with an intensity that made the entire lawn go still. Then she turned toward Brianna and demanded to know, in front of everyone, exactly whose child she was truly holding, because that baby was certainly not her son's. The crowd gasped as Margaret hurled clinic documents across the stage, exposing donor records naming Preston as the biological father of both twins. Brianna crumbled instantly, stammering denials nobody believed, while Marcus stared at the scattered papers as though the ground had opened beneath him. Preston, caught slipping toward the exit, was dragged back into the spotlight by his own furious aunt in front of judges, bankers, and lifelong family friends. That was the exact moment I walked through the estate gates, carrying a leather folder of my own. Every head turned toward the supposedly discarded ex-wife, arriving just as her replacement's fraud collapsed in real time. I walked onto the stage, nodded once to Margaret, and told Marcus and every guest present that while he built his fraudulent celebration, federal regulators had already frozen his company's accounts over forged revenue contracts used to secure predatory loans. Marcus accused me of orchestrating his downfall out of jealousy, but the accountant I invited to examine my documents confirmed every figure within minutes, and a panicked call from his own assistant confirmed federal agents were already inside his headquarters seizing servers. I explained that the equity stake I received in our settlement had already been sold to a liquidation firm whose only goal was dismantling his company, meaning as of that morning, Vantage Dynamics no longer belonged to him at all. Within minutes, his father's old friends were calling for the sheriff. His own father collapsed and had to be rushed away by paramedics, and Margaret walked past her son toward the ambulance without a single word, her silence louder than any scream. Marcus fell to his knees in front of the same crowd he had spent his life trying to impress, asking through broken sobs if I had ever truly loved him at all. I told him honestly that I had loved him enough to build an empire for him from nothing, but he threw that loyalty away the moment he decided my worth was tied to giving him children, instead of everything I had already given him. I told him this collapse was not revenge, only the final honest balance of everything he chose for himself, then turned and walked off that stage without looking back once. Within days, Brianna and Preston vanished with whatever cash and jewelry they could grab from his remaining accounts, proving even his own accomplices valued him only as long as his money kept flowing. Marcus called me weeks later from a borrowed phone, homeless in every sense that mattered, begging me to take him back now that his empire, his family name, and his fairy tale had all collapsed around him. I told him gently but firmly I was not his safety net anymore, and ended the call for the very last time. Today my career is thriving beyond anything I imagined during those long nights building someone else's dream instead of my own. I lead financial strategy for major investment funds, mentor women rebuilding their lives after betrayal, and sleep every night without wondering whose secrets are hiding behind a closed door. Marcus taught me, in the cruelest way possible, that the people who most underestimate your strength are usually the ones who benefited most from it. If this story kept you hooked until the very last word, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, because here on the Revenge Tales, we bring you real stories of betrayal, justice, and the moment someone finally takes the